Hello, Bethel family and friends. My name is Kevin Diehl, an elder here at Bethel Church. Tonight I'd like to talk about Psalm 100 and what it's meant to me in my devotion reading it. Psalm 100, I'll read it out loud. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues throughout all generations. So this psalm is basically a psalm of giving thanks to the Lord, for giving praise. Why should we give thanks and praise to the Lord, especially at this time? With the pandemic occurring at this time around the world. The answer is, why not? Thanking God and praising his name is not based on how we feel or what's going on, but rather it's a state of mind, a conscious decision to be joyful and to know that he is God and what he has done for us. Based on the knowledge of who God is and what he has done for us, regardless of what we are going through, this is our true worship, our true act of worship, to shout for joy. Is this a song of thanksgiving for the Jews only? For the church? For the future? I think the answer is in all three. For when this psalm was written, it was basically written for the Jews. This was their thankful offering to the Lord. They used it in a lot of different settings. As the church, we'll see that shortly, we'll see that we are God's people, and we'll get to that in a moment. But it also could be looked at as a future statement, because we are shouting, not only us, but the whole earth together. We see in verse 1 that there's a call for us to shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Shout, this is a call, a joyful call of worship to the Lord with gladness and with joyful songs. You'll notice that there's no conditions. It's not when we're happy or when things are going well. It's any time. And it's amazing that we're not just to whisper or just talk. We are to shout with joyful noise to the Lord. Verse 1 states that the whole earth is to shout to the Lord. And when we get to verse 3, the focus now seems to be narrowing down to his people. And we see that in this second part of verse 3. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. First, we are to acknowledge God in verse 3. My verse says, know God. Another way of saying that again is to acknowledge that the Lord is God and we are his people. Why? Because God is relational. He is intimate with his children. Verse 4, we see another call, and that is to enter his gates. How? Well, the psalmist tells us we are to enter his gates with thanksgiving and with praise. And to do what? Again, to give thanks and to give praise to the Lord. And why should we heed this call? In verse 5, he gives us an answer in three different ways. Number 1, that the Lord is good. Number 2, his love endures forever. And number 3, his faithfulness continues throughout all generations. And what struck me just reading this week, the term through all generations. And it made me think that every generation has critical times, crisis times. You know, we look back at World War II and the devastation that the European countries went through, where every night many of their cities were being bombed or armies were rushing right through them. That must have been a horrible time to live through. And yet people did. Why? Because the Lord was faithful to many people. We think of 2001, what happened on 9/11. There was a horrible day, and it was a horrible time, and yet God was faithful to his people. Same as now. The Lord is faithful, and the Lord is saying to us, I got this. Just trust and obey me. So we see that throughout these verses. What I like to do is just go through 7 takeaways from these verses. Number 1, it is that the Lord is God. There is no one like him. The only one and only true and living God, self-sufficient, self-everlasting. Verse 3, that he is our creator. He made us, and not the other way around. People make idols out of anything, and that becomes their God. But God is saying, I made you, you are mine. He is our rightful owner, and we are his people. We belong to him. He is our sovereign ruler, and we are his people, his subjects, and he is our prince and our judge, and he's our shepherd. And we kind of get the connotation there of being a sheep in his pasture. Then who said that in the New Testament? But Jesus, when he said, I am the good shepherd. The sheep know my name, and they know me. They know my voice, and they hear me, and they know me. Also in verse 3, we see the sheep of his pasture. We have a pasture. He's given us a pasture that maintains us. It provides us food. So God is a provider, a bountiful benefactor, our bountiful benefactor. And then verse 5, the Lord is good and his love endures forever. God is infinitely merciful and compassionate. And he is the God of truth, faithfulness for all eternity. And that's where we get to the part, his faithfulness continues through all generations. In conclusion, look at the verbs throughout this psalm. And it shows us how to approach our King, our Savior, and our Redeemer. Shout joyfully. Worship God. Know that he is God. And enter his gates and courts with joyful noise. As Matthew Henry stated, gospel worshipers should be joyful worshipers, regardless of the circumstances. And Hebrews 13, verse 15 tells us, through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of lips that confess his name. Thank you and have a good night.